Well, we're live. Right. Hi there, folks. This is WP-Tonic, episode 102, with myself, Jonathan Denwood, and my beloved co-host. Say hello, John.
Hello.
Oh, we've gone to hello, folks. I never know what he's going to say to that. So in this episode, folks, we're going to be talking about e-commerce. And we're going to start the first part of the show talking about some of the basic pitfalls that you should understand around e-commerce, about fully hosted solutions and not fully hosted, more like WooCommerce comes to mind. And then in the second part of the show, we're going to talk about some of the extensions that John's used that he's found really useful when it comes to WooCommerce. How does that sound, John?
Sounds amazing.
It does, doesn't it? So let's start the conversation off, John. So what is the basic difference between a fully hosted solution? Let's choose Shopify, and a solution that you host yourself, like WooCommerce. What's the difference, John?
Sure. So there's solutions out there for like e-commerce, like Shopify, BigCommerce, various ones. They're basically software as a service, where you pay a monthly fee and you can, throw up some products on your site, and you can customize it to a degree. But as long as it's within their templates, their, kind of range of how the site's going to look. So you pay them each month, and you can get a certain amount of products, and they take care of, processing the payments, and, you don't need to worry about hosting. And the limitation with that is, there's a degree of flexibility that you're giving up with that. It has to kind of fit within what they offer for either the layout or the solutions or products, any of that. So with a hosted solution, say if you're hosting your own, whether it's WooCommerce on top of WordPress, whether it's Zencart, Magento, or any of the other e-commerce platforms out there, you're responsible for the hosting, but you get a lot more flexibility. With these types of shops, you can make it whatever you want if you have someone to develop that solution for you. But the drawback is you again, have to have someone on hand that's going to be able to keep up with the updates, with updating software, making sure that you have adequate hosting, and coding your solution to begin with. So
yeah, that's great, John. I just want to point out to folks, I've got experience, not as much, nothing like as much experience as John when it comes to WooCommerce, but I've done a few. And I did quite a few Shopify about 2 years ago, which is like 5 years in web design, I suppose. But one thing I want to point out is that with Shopify, a lot of the functionality you get from third parties. And when Shopify is updated, sometimes there's a problem because the third party Shopify plugin doesn't get updated. So some of these problems cross over with one another. So it's not purely you're going to have more problems with a fully host solution yourself than with Shopify. It's a bit blurred. Would you agree with that, John?
Oh, well, see, that's very interesting because that's a common thing. Not so much in WooCommerce because most of the extensions they handle themselves, but there are because it is such an extensible thing, there are a lot of third-party plugins that don't always get updated like the day that WooCommerce gets updated. So it's interesting to hear that Shopify has a similar kind of problem, even in a self or what do you call it, like a SaaS, like a software as a service like type of solution. So
I think they would argue that it's not quite as comparative situation to a fully hosted, self-hosted solution. So let's move on. So some of the things, obviously, if you're going to take payment apart, if you're going to use PayPal, you've got to have a secure socket certificate, haven't you, John?
Yeah, definitely. There's so opening like an e-commerce store online is definitely you're going to have to set aside a little bit bigger budget, like monthly, and initially more than just a straight up like brochure site or a marketing site, because you're going to have things like a SSL certificate to keep people's information encrypted. And some payment gateways like the Stripe extension on top of WooCommerce requires it. That's just one of the expenses for sure. You're going to want to have adequate hosting for your e-commerce solution, WooCommerce or what have you. Because the one thing to understand is like these e-commerce plugins, they aren't just plugins; they are fully fledged web applications, and that cheap shared hosting that's like $5 a month ain't going to get it done. You have to have adequate hosting in order for this stuff to work.
Yeah, we did in a previous recent episode, folks, cover the hosting options. So if your memory can go back that far, like me, John, what kind of price, to get something that's going to work with WooCommerce? Are you looking at around between $15 to $29 plus for hosting per month?
Sure. So I would recommend for like most people something like WP Engine, which is $29 a month. If you buy it for a year, it's like $290 a year. The Flywheel is the same. You could definitely get something like SiteGround. That would be like bare minimum. So those three I would definitely recommend.
Yeah. Yep. Like I say, Emotion, SiteGround, WP Engine, Flywheel. There's quite a few, but we have listed them in that episode, which I will put a link in the show notes so you can get there, folks. But you're going to need decent hosting if you're going to go down the WooCommerce. When it comes to Shopify, folks, it starts at around $29 and goes up. They do something a bit less, but that's only for actually selling on Facebook. They include the secure socket certificate in that $29 as well. The other thing I would like to point out to folks is that when you're going, it's a little bit confusing actually, and I should ask John about this. There's a lot of options when it comes to secure socket certificates. A lot of hosting providers do charge a fair whack, but there's a lot of choice as well. But I would suggest you don't actually go for the cheapest. Go for the next one up. What would you say to that, John?
Yeah, so definitely. So the SSL certificates, you can get like a free SSL certificate from Let's Encrypt, and that's going around right now, but I wouldn't recommend that for your e-commerce store. A lot of people are saying that that's still kind of a nightmare to get configured with hosts for even regular sites. I would definitely opt into getting something that's like state-of-the-art security and encryption. Try and future-proof this stuff as best as possible. But
the prices, there's a wide span of prices. What kind of price range do you think somebody should be looking at?
So I would, and it varies because you can get like an SSL for as little as $60 or $70, and you can go up to like $200 or $300. Depending on what you want to have. Do you want to have like the whole like little part of the browser bar turn green and have like a highest level of security? maybe not that, but I would plan somewhere between $100 and $200 a year for your SSL. That's about what you should budget out for that. So
yeah, I would agree with that, folks. So you need your secure socket certificate. With Shopify or with WooCommerce, you are going to be buying some third-party plugins as well, because it just goes with the territory, folks. There's always additional functionality that you really need, and it's a lot cheaper to buy a third-party plugin than to get something coded up for you. It's going to be a lot cheaper. So the three areas where you normally end up buying additional plugin functionality, also you need to plan out is the three I would say is shipping, sales tax, dealing with sales, not with additional plugins maybe, but you need to think these out. I apologize, folks. Is shipping, sales tax, and if you need integration with your accountancy system. Would you agree with that, John? They're the three things you got to start thinking of.
Yeah, definitely. So shipping is a big one, because most of these e-commerce stores are going to be for physical goods, which go through the mail. Sometimes it's virtual products, but not always. You're going to need to know the sales tax laws, like in your state. Every state has different laws in regards to who's responsible for the sales tax at the end of the year. So know about that, do your research, and integration with your accounting software, something like QuickBooks or whatever it is. Definitely do the research into that too, and find out if you have integration that's possible to where you can pull those sales directly down into your spreadsheet.
Yeah, it's great stuff. When it comes to starting off, folks, this is only my advice. If you're just trying the concept out initially, and you've got an initial group of products that you're going to put on the site and just try it out, I'll try and keep it as simple as possible, and I'll be interested if John agrees with this. But if you're just trying it out, keep it simple. And I would suggest you work out what your mean average is to ship out those starter products, and say to people you're doing free shipping, but include the mean average, put that on top of the price of the product. Would you agree with that idea?
So I've got firsthand experience with this, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So
I thought you might.
Yeah, I do actually. So in theory, free shipping, and building it into the price is a good idea. And that can work as long as all your products are similar size and weight.
Yeah.
Now, if you've got products that are different sizes, different weights, or bulky, or they're large, you can average that out, but you've got to average for the farthest place that you've got to possibly ship it to, and build that into the price, because otherwise you can end up eating a lot of the cost yourself. But the reason that you might want to build the shipping costs directly into your price and just do free shipping is because if you do ship bulky items, a lot of people are going to be turned off by seeing the shipping price being really huge. And again, it depends on what you're shipping through the mail. If it's smaller, medium-sized products, it's not a big deal. If they're bigger products, you should really research in that, because again, you can eat a lot of the cost right away. So.
Yeah, I'm only suggest, like I said, folks, everything John's just said is totally correct, but I'm only suggesting this as a start-off policy. And you really got, it's around what your margins are like, like what John said. Have you got those initial products? Do the size and weight, are they very diverse? If that's the case, what I'm probably saying ain't going to pan out. But if you can do it, just to start off with, it will just save you a lot of working out with pen and pencil and calculator. And I just think it's the simplest way to start. But sometimes you just can't do that, folks. So I think we're going to pause, folks, and we'll go on to our first break. And when we come back, we'll talk about the other two major things, talk a little bit about WooCommerce, and then this probably is going to be a three-parter because it's quite a large subject. And we'll get back to you in a minute. We're coming back, folks. We're going to talk some more about e-commerce and about some of the things you got to understand, some of the pitfalls that catches out a lot of people. And if you understand these before you start on your journey of e-commerce domination, things will go a bit better for you. So let's go on to sales tax. Now, this changes, and I might be a little bit out of date. I know John isn't. There are some states where the actual districts are allowed to put additional sales tax. And funny enough, Nevada is one of those. Now, Nevada is broken out into 16 districts that make southern and northern Nevada, folks. And there is a sales tax, but each district have the right and do put an additional surcharge on the sales tax. I don't know if WooCommerce, but I knew when I was working with Shopify, it couldn't handle that, and there wasn't a third party that did. What you had to do was work out a mean average again. You worked out the mean average of the 16 districts with the addition, and you had some you lost a little bit on, others you gained on. And I think Florida and New York were similar. Also, it used to be you had to, if you were based in the state and someone who was buying from that state, or you had warehousing facilities in the state that somebody was buying from, you had to charge them sales tax. But I don't know if that situation's changed. Am I out of date a little bit, or roughly right, John?
No, you are. What you're talking about is the sales nexus. And basically, like the rules of like whatever state you're in, I can share links with this like later. I think there's actually an article about this on my site that links to another site that talked about this extensively. Depending on what state you live in, you're either the person who's buying from you, or you, the person who's shipping, is responsible for the sales tax. And I think in California, like, you're responsible for sales tax, and each county has like a different like rate, or each city has a different rate. Like here in Sacramento, I think it's I want to say it's like 8.75 is the rate. I have a client who's down near Orange County, and I think there it's like 9% where he's living. So yeah, it's gonna vary. I think WooCommerce does some of that calculation on its own, of like knowing like where you're at and like what state you're in.
Because it changed, didn't it? They brought out this to deal with Amazon, and I'm not sure it was national or it was state by state, where if you buy something online, you're supposed to, if you got a state tax, you're supposed to actually tell the state what you bought and pay the tax or something like that, isn't it? Or...
Yeah, your out-of-state purchases. So that's like state tax, and so with Amazon, I think at the end of the year, like, I just kind of like guess as far as that, but you know, and again, depending on what state you live in or you do business in, and that could be anywhere that you have a warehouse or an office. Basically, that's your nexus of operation. You have like some sort of physical presence there. That could be considered, you know, like your home state.
Because when it comes to Amazon, that they, you know, you order, they know your home address and they work it all out, Amazon, and you get charged it and they pay it. But if you're buying off a website that doesn't charge you the extra, you're supposed to declare it at the end of the year. Is that right?
Yeah, you have to say if you're like the person selling goods, you're the merchant, you have to declare like how much you sold, and you get taxed based on whatever the tax rate is for your city and state. And depending on how much you sell, basically, yeah. You gotta.
Well, the good news, folks, is that there's a lot of information out there about this. We're just giving you a little inkling that you got to work this one out, because especially if you're based, I've been told this, I don't know if this is true, John, especially if you're based in California, because I've been told by certain individuals that the Californian state income tax board are even less friendlier than the Internal Revenue Service. Is that right, John? They're even less happy people.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they're about equal.
Right. Well, let's hope so. So we'll get off that one because I don't want to get myself into trouble. So John was being very diplomatic as usual. So it's just a little bit complicated, but like I said, folks, the good news is there's a lot of information, and we'll probably have some links in the notes on the website.
And so I want to tell you, I just want to add this to you for the people at home. WooCommerce does like allow you to enter the prices like either inclusive of tax or exclusives, either with the tax or without. And you can calculate the tax based on either your address of your shop or the customer, shipping or billing address. And so depending on what state you're in, you can, once you know what laws are adhere to your state, you can set up your cart to adhere to those laws to where it's not a big sticky mess at the end of the year.
Yeah, that's great. So I've probably totally confused the audience. John's trying to clear my verbal mess up. Thank you, John. I didn't mean to, folks. It is a little bit complicated, but we're going to move on before I confuse you even more. So let's go on to the other thing that kind of turned up periodically about halfway through the actual project, until I learned to bring it up on day one and give the clear options to my clients, and that was integrating with your accountancy. And a lot of clients really got on a kind of bit of a high horse about this, and I always said to them, let's get some customers first, let's get this thing rolling and you making a little bit of money, and then maybe worry. But then they said, oh, what happens when we get inundated? We're inundated straight away, which would be great if it happened. I never knew a client who didn't have an enormous online marketing budget, who was buying for traffic, did get inundated. So I always thought it was best to get the ball rolling and then have some concerns about this. The other thing was that Shopify or some of the WooCommerce didn't have fantastic integration with the leader, which is QuickBooks. What's the situation now with WooCommerce at the present? Got any knowledge of that, John, about integrating with QuickBooks?
So there's lots of different ways that you can integrate with QuickBooks with WooCommerce. WooCommerce itself has an extension, QuickBooks Online integration, and so you can integrate with anywhere within the US, United Kingdom, Canada, or Australia, and so you can sync your customers' inventory and products, and so that's definitely one way that you can do that. There are other third-party plugins that will do that. I believe that QuickBooks has one of their own. So there's definitely that. There's other people that make products that will do that. You can also integrate using Zapier to using their system of basically if this happens, then make this happen over here, and the two applications talk to each other. So
so I just want to say about Zapier, folks, it's a kind of they provide kind of little a kind of hosted solution where they've made like little applets. That's the only way I can describe that. Will make kind of third-party applications talk to one another, and they do some of that. Have you used any of these at all with QuickBooks? Is there any kind of that you've been reasonably happy with, or not really?
No, I can't. I haven't actually done this particular like integration. I've done like other like integrations that are like mind-boggling, but not this particular one. But why don't you share your experiences with this? And
there were nightmares. Tried it with Shopify with third parties that were pretty expensive. Dismal support. I got the blame for it. Never went down that route. And a couple of the had dissatisfaction with some of the third party, but it was a couple of years ago. I don't know what's happened to the time, because I've been building my SaaS, my maintenance company. So I'm not been building e-commerce websites. I've been doing maintenance.
Can't say I blame you.
So we maintain not through our normal packages, but some of our clients that we've built very tight relationships, we do support e-commerce, but it's not through our normal packages. But they haven't got integration with QuickBooks, so we're not had to deal with that. So I don't actually. Now they're the three that came to my mind. Are there other things that when people started on this road of e-commerce domination that people got to keep in mind, John?
Well, definitely. There's like a lot of things that. There's a lot of questions that need to be answered when you're going to build like an e-commerce store. And number one, I think with that is like, what type of payment gateway integration are you going to need? Now, WooCommerce comes with PayPal straight out the box, but most people are going to want to take credit cards. And so they're going to need either Stripe, or they're going to need authorize.net or some other means of support. Maybe you want to take Amazon payments. Basically, there's an extension for like everything underneath the sun with WooCommerce, but it's just getting whatever third-party payment gateway you're using, whether it's Stripe or Authorize or whatever.
I've heard I've never used it. I just wondered if you have. I've heard some really great stuff about Braintree and about their. Have you had anything to do with that, integrating with Braintree?
I have not had any integration with Braintree. Most of the people that I deal with like either go with Authorize or Stripe.
Yeah.
So one or the other. Stripe seems to be a little bit easier.
Yeah, I like Stripe, but some people would say that below 1,000 you're paying a little bit high. But I think it's worth it, because I think it's a bit like the other things I said, folks, just to get started. If you're looking to get started, I think Stripe's one of the easiest ways to go. If you want to take Stripe and PayPal at the same time on the same checkout, does WooCommerce deal, or are there kind of third-party plugins that allow you to have both options on the checkout?
So are you saying you want to check out like part with this and then part with that?
Yeah, given the option to either pay through credit cards, which would go through Stripe, or pay by PayPal.
Oh, okay. So that's pretty simple. Like I said, there's a Stripe extension for WooCommerce, and as of like a few months ago, it's like totally free. It was like right after I bought a license, but it goes to show. But basically, what you're going to need, say you've got either Stripe, or you've got Authorize, or you've got Braintree, you're going to need an account with them, with that payment gateway, and then you're going to need the extension that allows like your site and WooCommerce to talk to the payment gateway. Because this is what people don't understand, like with why e-commerce sites, they think it's really super simple to set up WooCommerce. But here's the thing. All these parts have to work together. And if like any part of these, like, anything in the chain, the hosting, WooCommerce, like the extension, like your payment gateway, the bank, anything like that, like any like little piece comes unhinged, like it can, you know, be a disaster and things don't go as expected. So yeah, basically you're going to need like an account with whatever your payment gateway is. You're going to need the extension, get all your like credentials set up with your payment gateway account, you know, put those into the extension on WooCommerce. And, you know, usually you'll do like some test runs, like a sandbox transactions, make sure everything's working correctly. And then you take it to production, which means it's live. And you're actually taking transactions. Probably good to do a few like test transactions, make sure everything's going nice, and then, you know, push it out live. So
yeah, that's great, John. Time's flown. We're going to, like I say, this is going to be a three-parter, folks. Cool. And so we're going to go for our second break, and we'll be back to kind of finish off this, and then maybe talk about some of the WooCommerce extensions that John recommends and has used. Be back in a minute, folks. We're coming back, folks, talking more about e-commerce and dominating your market. So we were talking about gateway providers. Like I was saying, I think Stripe's the easiest way to go. Another thing I would just say to you, we discussed this also last Saturday. We had a great, we had a abandoned blab for technical reasons, but we had a great Google Hangout, and it will be hopefully going live tomorrow on the WP iTunes. But we had a great discussion about e-commerce, folks, and there was a little bit, one of our great panel disagreed with me, but I think when you're really, really starting out on this, it might be worthwhile looking at something like Shopify. But there was disagreement with my position, and I'm fine with it. But one thing I would say about is I would try Shopify, but I wouldn't invest a lot of money with it. And what I mean is making some really that really fits everything you want there and then for future plans. I would just use it as a way of testing it, you know, the waters, really, to see if there's a demand, sort out your marketing message, and just try it out. But don't spend a load of money on third-party extensions with Shopify and spending a lot of time on a personalized custom design. I would get it going, and then at some stage I would hire somebody like John and get a really truly custom theme that meets all your requirements, and somebody like John to help you build something that's truly customized to uniques of your business. Would you agree with that, John?
Well, yeah, I definitely agree that you should hire me to build your custom site. No, I if you go back and listen to last Saturday's discussion, you know, there was some like disagreement, but, you know, there was some of the panel that said, you know, Shopify is good for a temporary solution. But what you're saying I'm completely on board with is, before you sink a whole bunch of money into a custom site, before you know, drop thousands of dollars on, you know, building out this custom self-hosted like WooCommerce site, test and make sure that your like product ideas like have a market. Shopify is good for like temporary.
Yeah,
it might not be great for like a permanent solution.
Well, some people would disagree with that, wouldn't they? I agree with you, but we're WordPress junkies, aren't we? We're, you know, we are, but I think we try and be balanced. You and John and myself, we try and be balanced. But some people just really, really love Shopify. But I think they're tools and they have the right place at the right time, don't they, John?
Sure, everything has you know, its place, and you know, some tools are better for different things. But the big thing is to test your idea, make sure that your minimum viable idea is, you know, out there. Make sure that your products, there's actual demand for them, and you know, if there is, and then go ahead and scale up. You know, do your custom site. But it's good. You can test it on something like a Squarespace or a Shopify.
Yeah.
Before, you know, making the big commitment. So.
I've never used I've never used Squarespace. I imagine it's okay. I would prefer Shopify because of all the extension. But like I say, the problem with that is you can get very sucked into it, and then when you do need to move to a fully custom solution, it's become a bit of a nightmare, and you've spent a lot of money. So it's a balance. I would start with Shopify, but have the key things that I need, buy those, and have a cut-off point where you're just going to get the key things, might have to buy some extensions, but you're going to stop. And then you're planning. I would say for the fully self-hosted solution, compared to some of the others, I'm going to butcher them. I could never pronounce the name, John. Magento?
Yeah.
Compared to Magento is another. They offer two flavors, actually, folks. They offer a fully hosted solution, and one that you have on your own server. I would not use their hosted solution because you get sucked into their, and WooCommerce compared to their is a lot easier to use. And don't get me wrong, if you've got a really, really, really enormous e-commerce shop and you're really doing a lot of turnover, I'm talking 50, 100, 200,000 a week plus, you might look at it, but unless there's not many people I know doing that. So I think WooCommerce is the most flexible, easy. It's not easy, but compared to some of these other fully self-hosted solution, it offers the most flexibility, the biggest development community, the biggest community of third-party plugins. Would you agree with some of those statements, John?
I would say it's definitely the most flexible. It's the most extensible. There's the most high-quality third-party plugins to make it do what you want. And I think if you're in that anywhere from just starting out to, just below like your enterprise level, that's a good solution. I think when you start getting to enterprise level, you can definitely start looking at Magento as well. I know that there are like some enterprise shops that are on WooCommerce, but then you're getting into more like a complete like solution, like looking at hosting and all kinds of tweaking to.
It never stops when you get to that size, folks, but it means you're doing very well as well. So that's the nice side of it, isn't it, John?
Good problem to have. Yeah,
it's a nice problem. So shall we look at some of quickly some of these third party? And you started off with Stripe as your first third party plugin for Woo themes. What's this plugin about? About Stripe, basically, isn't it?
So basically, this is a payment gateway. If you have a Stripe account, like WooCommerce is like very generously like made this extension completely free. You can use it up to 25 sites, totally free. This used to be, I think it was like 99 for like one site, and I think it went up to like I think at one point it was like $2.99 for like up to 25 sites.
It was quite expensive. But, yeah. It was quite expensive third-party plugin, wasn't it?
Well, any of them are gonna be, but you can take basically all major credit cards with this. It's a little bit easier to set up than authorize.
Which is the next one, which is authorized extension comparison. Right. So what is this the one that integrates authorized with WooCommerce? Is that it?
So there's different ones. There's different extensions for WooCommerce, for authorized integrating with WooCommerce. There's like SIM like solution. There's like DPM, and basically the big difference is with these is, do you want authorized to handle like the PCI compliance, or do you want to like capture stuff like directly on your site? A lot of people use the DPM because basically what happens is they go to process the payment, It hands off to authorize. They handle all the PCI compliance to where you're not storing like people's personal information or their credit card information on your site. It does the transaction, then it hands it back to like WooCommerce.
That's great. So I'm rushing you a little bit because I've got a few.
It's okay.
We got about 6 minutes.
Okay, let's do it. 6 minutes. Don't you fresh? You're on.
Then we got to do a little ending. Table rate shipping. What does this do?
Okay, so table rate shipping, like a lot of times you're going to want to have like different like shipping rates and different shipping tables depending on where you want to ship to. I know that WooCommerce is like changing like their core functionality very soon to integrate like different shipping zones directly into that. It's going to be a major change coming down really soon. But basically this allows you to make different shipping rules and different shipping zones to where if you're shipping out to different places, you can have specific rules apply to products.
Well, rather important then, isn't it? Then we go on to Gravity Forms, products, add-ons.
Okay, so people who develop, they know that like Gravity Forms, it has like conditional logic and stuff like that. So I have used this before. Basically, you can make like different options for like different products. Like the Gravity Forms like integrates like with the product itself. You can set up different product rules and say like on this like specific product, add like these like different like form items, and you can make check boxes or like radio boxes, conditional like items, to where you can for example, I used this on a site before where people were like ordering like different like like coffee, beverages, espresso drinks and stuff like that, and smoothies, and they could add like protein powder, they could add an extra shot of espresso or whatever for to each one. So this allowed people to order like online with different like form fields in there without having to tweak out like WooCommerce too much. It just builds right in. So
sounds rather important actually, folks. Sounds a really tasty add-on, really. Next one, WooCommerce subscriptions. I suppose we could have a whole episode about this, really, couldn't we?
Yeah, you really could. So basically, this allows you to have like recurring payments, and say if you've got like protected content or something that you've given people like access to, you can collect like recurring payments like month after month and set that up to where people enter their card, and it's just it's almost like a membership. There is like a plugin for that, like WooCommerce membership, but you can use those in conjunction, and this gives you a way to charge people on a recurring basis.
Yeah. On to the next one. WooCommerce Tab Manager.
So in the default like WooCommerce like product setup, you've got different like columns. You've got like one for product information, and then you've got one for like write a review, and here's like additional details. With the tab manager, I've run into like cases where I had to like add like extra like tabs with variable information, so you can change like very easily without having to go in and like change the actual like WooCommerce templates and stuff like that. You can just change what the headings of each tab is. You can add new tabs. You can control like what's in there very specifically without having to do a bunch of overrides. So this can be a really useful plugin.
And I think the last word is Woo Themes documentation. Yeah. Go on. What would you like to say about that? In general, do you think their documentation's got a lot better? Is it really good, or what do you feel about it?
Woo Themes, or like WooCommerce, there's a lot of documentation for it. It is like a pretty developer centric. I mean, as long as you understand like WordPress, like actions, hooks, and filters, you can pretty much develop anything with WooCommerce as far as like custom templates. There's definitely people that do custom plugins. Shop Plugins by Daniel Espinosa is like one of those. He's putting out some good stuff, so check that out. There's a ton of documentation, but it is easy once you understand like how WordPress works.
Yeah.
like a newbie person, maybe not so much. But if you understand like how WordPress works, it's extremely useful. So
yeah, this is why it's another suggestion why you might be better off if you're just looking to try the concept, and you still might hire a. I would advise you to hire a consultant like myself, or a true developer like John. He's a unicorn. He's one of those horrible unicorns. He designs and develops. It's not many of them around, actually, and he's good at both of them. But it might be a good idea to hire a consultant if you're even going to go Shopify route, because you do need because you're going to waste a lot of time. And the thing is to get this up and running and get the initial concept up and running and seeing if you're taking cash. Right? Is the online shopping cart ringing? And then I would suggest you give it 6-7 months, and then you look at moving to WooCommerce. I a lot of people disagree with me, folks, but that's my honest opinion about it. Try it on something like Shopify, which I think is the best, easiest to get going, kind of focused e-commerce platform, and then look at WooCommerce. So that's my bit, John. So how can people get hold of you, John, to find out more about this or get some consultation or some help, John?
Sure. You can find me at my site, lockdowndesign.com. And you can also follow me on Twitter, lockdown_. How do the fine people get a hold of you, Jonathan, if they want to hire you or use your services at WP-Tonic?
Yeah, we're a maintenance company, folks. You pay a monthly subscription. It starts at $29.99, which is, we include 2 small jobs per month in that starting price. Then our medium is $69.99, and we stop you from, if you've got a small job and maybe your initial developer can't help you because they're too busy or they're moved on, whatever. Instead of you having to go on Fiverr or some freelance website and deal with somebody you never dealt with, you pay us a monthly subscription, and you get my support and you get my team's support, and you send us a ticket and the problem is dealt with. And we do full backup security. And if that's of interest, then I think it's a fantastic service. I honestly do. Go to WP-Tonic.com, and we've got loads of information. Or you could email me at jonathan@w-tonic.com, or you can go to Twitter at Jonathan Denwood, and I'm on there almost every day checking people out, so you can get hold of me on that. So I think one thing I would ask you folks to show your support to the show is to go to iTunes and subscribe to the show and leave us a review. The reviews are really important. They will help more people find the show, and I would really, me and John would appreciate if you could leave a review. That would be great. So I think
5-star.
Yeah, 5 stars. So I think we covered a ton of stuff, haven't we, John?
Yeah, I believe so.
Right then. So we're going now, folks. See you next time on WP Tonic. Say goodbye,
Peace.
John. Right. Bye.